Right. Good morning. Representative Cambrils is not here today. He's out sick, so I'll be running the meeting. We'll start with the work session on House Bill 1458 as amended by the House. I have an amendment I gave to the committee and the LBA. There's more copies on the table if anyone's interested. That eliminates the need for a person with a proprietor's license to also have a specific massage therapist license, because you've got to. The purpose of that is that the person who actually runs these illicit massage establishments that we're trying to be able to penalize is not necessarily a therapist on their own, since they're basically a human trafficker. So if you can get them for not having a proprietor's license, there's no need to also get them for not having a professional license. That's the goal of the amendment. And I've worked it out with Representative Leon and the DNA committee. Anyone else have a comment, question, concern, issue before I make a motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we're I know we're looking at 1458 now, but it's difficult to analyze this bill in isolation to the next bill, 1469, because they deal with the same subject matter. Now, my question with 1458 is, my understanding is this is regarding the licensing of the proprietor, but not the establishment.
That's correct. What that does is that it focuses on an actual individual who will have to get criminal background checks and provide identity information, so that they're available for prosecution if it turns out they have a invalid operation. And that makes it very much easier for the honest proprietors to, because the proprietor's license is not that difficult to get if you're an honest person running an honest operation. The full licensing and inspection requirements in 1469 are more of a hassle for the good guys in the business.
Okay, the way I see it and my understanding, because we've dealt with this issue in Merrimack as well, is that because if it is a human trafficking organization, it's really not driven by the proprietor. The proprietor can go from establishment to establishment as the law enforcement chases them around, while the network just puts somebody else in place. So my understanding is it's better to shut down the whole place than go after the single proprietor. Am I mistaken in that?
Well, if you go after the single proprietor, you have an individual who is, to some degree, central to the whole operation, who is criminally liable for running such an operation.
I see that, but my understanding of those criminal networks is that the proprietor may just be an on-site manager that doesn't control the entire network. They're just controlling a little part of it, and they can be moved around.
Right, except that if they're in jail for hiring people without a license, they can't be moved around. It requires them to provide the information that that they have identity, social security number, and no convictions under a whole list of human trafficking, sexual abuse, and criminal fraud crimes. And if they can find it, it's going to make it difficult for them to get people that can do that.
Okay, two more questions I have. It's still, in my opinion, that it's better to shut down the whole establishment than to arrest the proprietor, because the network can bring other proprietors in. So that's something I still struggle with. And then the second question is there anything that precludes us from just passing both of these?
No, we're going to
Okay.
We're going to discuss this one and make a recommendation and then go on to the next one.
Okay, thank you.
If you have questions about the policy, Representative Mannion, who is, I believe, one of the sponsors, is here, and Representative Leon is here from ED&A. Do you have questions for them?
I don't know if I've questioned yet. I just saw the amendment, so I'm just gonna see how that impacts the bill. This is on 1458.
Yeah, 1458
Okay.
first. Anyone else? Representative Leon, do you wish to make a statement or two while we're contemplating the bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Erica Leon, State Representative from Derry, which is Rockingham 13, prime sponsor of 1458, Chair of the House Executive Departments and Administration Committee, and Chair of the Commission on Illicit Human Trafficking, the Commission to Study Human Trafficking and Illicit Massage Businesses. I'm not speaking on behalf of that commission, but I'm just telling you about my background within this. I would actually state that massage establishment is defined in here as any operation where it has more than one person performing massage. Same with body work when you get to that. You can't have a multi-person massage establishment without a proprietor. So if you had one where they shipped off the operator from one place to another, and they didn't have a new proprietor's license for that, that would be automatic reason for closure, reason for inspection from OPLC, and reason for action for the town for unlicensed practice. So this already provides the opportunity for law enforcement. I would like to note that within all the hearings that we've had over this topic, I went through to sort of get what the core issues are. The Derry Police Lieutenant Jonathan Bream in testimony said that owners of these businesses rarely reside in New Hampshire, making them difficult to identify and hold accountable. Requiring their identity and a criminal background check reduces the pool of bad actors operating facilities while not impacting the people that live in New Hampshire and have legitimate businesses. He further said providing licensing and regulated oversight for these establishments would provide inspectors a critical tool to identify fraudulent and illegal activity and report it to the appropriate agencies. This does give that entrance point for OPLC. It gives an entrance point for any of these inspections or anything else that needs to happen while keeping it to a low-cost interaction. In my conversations with Derry Chief of Police, George Fioli, he's troubled by the illicit facilities that are operated by people with convictions for prostitution in town and the inability to stop these people from opening these fronts. That is why my bill would require that people who have proprietor licenses don't have crimes of interfering with freedom, which is kidnapping or human trafficking, or sex crimes convictions. We need the state to take this very seriously and give law enforcement and state agencies the authority and tools to help victims and prevent our communities from being exploited by these dangerous establishments. From Charlie Penderbury, Detective Sergeant with Merrimack County Sheriff's Department, and he used to be a human trafficking task force officer with the DHS, and that in the coalition testimony, they said that illicit massage businesses proliferate because they're able to move fluidly from one location to the next without scrutiny, and that right now the only victims are the would-be licensees, the women being trafficked. By having a proprietor license where you clearly identify the person operating it through a Social Security or taxpayer ID, we're able to deal with the largest problem that law enforcement has brought to us. They know that somebody's doing this, but they can't pin exactly who it is because you have a facility where one in Merrimack is giving an address of a place in Derry, and Derry's giving the address of Merrimack, and they're essentially ghosts operating this. So 1458 at a cost of less than $10,000 a year would make it so that anybody operating these, we know who they are. We know they haven't been convicted of being a certain kind of bad guy. And we'll also know how many establishments there are in the state should this body choose to move forward with health and safety inspections at any point in the future, so that we know what that cost will be when it's distributed amongst all these establishments. Because quite frankly, we don't know if there'll only be 10 bodywork establishments in the state, and asking the bodywork establishments to take their share, if it's $50,000 for them and $50,000 for massage, that'd be $5,000 an establishment for the licensing for a bodywork establishment, and we might be putting good people out of business. That's why I'm recommending to start with the law enforcement first one that gives the tools to put the bad guys in prison, and hold on to the idea of the greater inspection one until we know the size of the market and we know if we've already run these guys out of town. Because the whole point is to make New Hampshire inhospitable to sex traffickers, and there's other states with inspections. They still have human trafficking. Getting an identity might just make these guys leave because the cost of doing business is too high. So that's the background, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Munns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, sorry. Thank you for coming in. And forgive me, I'm not, up on all of the rules regarding licensure. If we know that or suspect that most of the proprietors of these establishments are located out of state, can we make a requirement for a proprietorship license that for these establishments that you must be living in New Hampshire? Or does that create all sorts of constitutional problems?
I was concerned about the problems that we might have. If there's somebody who lives, let's say there's something in Rochester and the person lives in Lebanon, Maine. We don't want to exclude them from operating one of these facilities. But the biggest problem with out-of-state operators is we don't know who they are. I don't care where somebody lives if we have their social security number and their clean criminal history, because quite frankly, then it's interstate crimes if they're operating it from out of state. And all we need to do is provide that information to the federal government and they can go after them. But until they know who these people are, they're just ghosts in the wind.
Thank you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Representative Munns, we have too many borders with civilized places that we don't want to shut down just to block the people from Lowell. Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here to answer questions and help us through this. Just trying to, between the two bills, 1458 and 1469, the real difference, it seems, on the fiscal side of things is 1469 would require us to hire a paralegal that's the cost. That's the $100,000 a year cost, and 1458 doesn't require that.
Thank you. It actually goes beyond that. The rulemaking authority that's in 1458, it's section 3 of the bill. It simply is around exemptions for the definition, so that if you have somebody with a sole that only operates for themselves, but they might have somebody once or twice a month where they have another licensed professional come in for a couples massage because somebody wants that, then they don't need to get this licensing just because on a one-off basis. So that's leaving it to OPLC to figure out where those soft edges between these multi-person locations are and what's just normal practice. There's already some existing definitions around that so that they can lean on those. And then also rulemaking on the verification of identity with social security number or taxpayer ID and the background checks for those convictions. If you look at section 5 of House Bill 1469, that is actually a very broad rulemaking authority. Regulate and adopt rules on massage establishments, including standards for licensing massage establishments, conditions, requirements, and standards for operation under an establishment license, including health and safety standards, standards for inspections of establishments, requirements to open, close, relocate, or renew an establishment, requiring public display of licensure and secure record-keeping procedures, qualifications for exemptions of school, health facilities, or others for massage establishment licensure required by this, required documentation to verify sole proprietor independent contractor designation. I'm guessing that's probably going to be, well, I mean, right now I think we have some slimmer rulemaking, so maybe that might only be 40 or 50 pages of rulemaking. It could expand to hundreds of pages of rulemaking based on that authority, and that has a pretty significant cost. And the process of rulemaking is not free. I actually think we have the executive director who can speak to the details on where the cost comes from, but just that broad rulemaking authority itself does have a higher cost. And additionally, that cost, which is borne by the licensees, we won't know how many there are until we have some way to do that. And if we can find the market size with background checks and social security numbers, we'll get a better idea of how large this is. And then we'll know how that cost will be allocated. I'm not saying never to inspections. I'm just
Sure.
saying that right now, there's so many open questions that it's prudent to figure out the size of the market, see if we drive out the bad actors, and then come through and figure out how to do it and maybe get tighter rules on tighter requirements on the rulemaking authority. As they came through ADNA, they sort of moved on parallel tracks because there was a disagreement in approach. So I kept my hands off of the 1469 to allow those people, the people pushing that one, to do what they were looking to do. So it's two different approaches. I find mine to be surgical and elegant and less costly. And I don't know what your committee will decide, but I see that as a way to strike the root of the problem, get the information we need for a broader bill potentially in the future, and to just start this process.
Thank you.
Representative Vons?
Thank you. In your, in the written comments that you submitted, there's a comment here, this is not a law enforcement first bill. Can you provide some context to that?
Yes, when I'm not sure if she's a sponsor or just a supporter of the bill, but when House Bill 1469 was introduced to our committee, I was kind of surprised to hear the testimony from Representative Joni Nelson saying that it was not a law enforcement first bill. That the intention of 1469, at least in her opinion, was on the health and safety and health inspections of the facilities, not law enforcement. To me, the only way to really deal with criminal, multinational, potentially organizations that are involved in sex trafficking is through law enforcement. And that's why 1458 is expressly a law enforcement first bill.
Representative Abel?
Thank you, Representative Leon. Again, it's kind of hard to talk about each one of these in isolation. My understanding with respect to your question, Representative Sweeney, is that there had been some conversation with the executive director and that the fiscal note could similarly be zero without affecting the bill on 1469. But there hasn't really been time, I guess, to prepare an additional fiscal note.
We do have an updated fiscal note for
For 1669. Yeah, but I, my,
1469. Yes,
1469.
we do,
Okay,
and it is
right,
in fact,
100,000. But may
it's
I,
not much different from the original.
I mean, Deanne is here. She can talk more about this, but my understanding is that without affecting the bill, the fiscal note could similarly be reduced to zero like 1458. But we can talk about that at some other point.
Director Jarius?
Good morning. For the record, Dee Juris, Executive Director, OPLC. I'm going to try to address a couple of the questions. If I miss any piece, just from my listening, please feel free to repeat any question that I missed. So the 1458, the bill that I believe you're on right now, we're trying to isolate between the two, does not create any positions, nor does the statutory requirements that are laid out necessitate the creation of a new position, in my opinion. So when we draft, sorry, I feel like this is echoing. When we draft a fiscal note, sometimes the bill expressly says there is a position created. It does not always say that, but sometimes in my estimation, for instance, with an inspection requirement saying, I will need inspectors to do that work. I do not have people who are doing that work right now. So 1458 does not necessitate the creation of any new positions. So the fiscal note reflects that in that piece. In 1469, just for the sake of conversation and for clarity, there is in the bill presently the creation of a position, the salary and benefits of which is over $100,000 a year. So the effective date was pushed out when it was amended in the policy committee. And so instead of over 3 years, it's only over 2. In addition to that, there was the removal of the inspection of the facilities. So instead of 2 positions plus the one that was in the bill, so again, 2 that I said, I'm going to need people to do that inspection work. And then this additional paralegal, there's only 1 position there. And the updated fiscal note reflects that change from 3 positions to 1 in 1469. The rulemaking cost is what it is. Things some take longer and shorter. I don't know that the cost will ever truly be zero, but that up to $10,000, $0 to $10,000 range, I understand for the purpose of this committee, if that's the lowest range, you're not looking at those fiscal notes. With the existing rulemaking support, to the best of our knowledge, both bills would require additional rulemaking, could potentially increase enforcement costs. It could generate more complaints. There are more licensees in general. I do think the cost of compliance, the more rules that you implement, the more statutory requirements there are for doing business, the cost of compliance could potentially go up for those proprietors, but not necessarily for the state. Does that provide the needed clarity?
Yes, thank you, Representative
Yeah.
Evil.
So, I never know, I don't know when to ask this question. Could 1469 proceed without the additional individual?
That's named in the current proposed bill?
Yes. I mean, could that be amended to remove the personnel if that would
Could be.
reduce the cost?
Certainly, the committee certainly could do that.
Would you still do what you need to do? Sorry.
I believe the intent of including that position would have been in the enforcement division to review additional complaints and other compliance issues that had come up. I think the reason for that was initially when the inspections were going to be done, they were going to be finding a lot more violations that needed enforcement action. So the difference between receiving a complaint and taking action versus going into every single establishment to find violations, certainly the volume is higher with that inspection, that very active, regular visit. So my understanding is the intention originally of including that position was to deal with an increased number of violations coming into the office. Without that very proactive, very forward-facing, going and finding violations, I think it's possible. I don't know long-term. We're not doing this work right now. It is possible that the enforcement division as it currently exists could function without that. I might be coming back to you after a year or two of this implementing, say the volume is very high, we need more. But I couldn't confidently say I need that position, absolutely. Does that help?
And I should mention that one reason that suggestions of licensing massage establishments have failed multiple times is that it's very difficult to come up with a scheme that catches the bad guys without grossly imposing on the legitimate businesses, particularly the smaller businesses that are the bulk of the massage establishments in the state. We don't want to impose, an inspection a year on every 1 or 2 person operation that has no complaints and is fully licensed and fully legitimate. And that's what most of these inspection requirements would do. If it turns out that it's, a significant number of bad actors that you need massive enforcement, you're going to be jacking up the price of an establishment license tremendously. And that's also a burden on the many small legitimate businesses. And that was the reason that we, on previous bills, didn't move forward, because we couldn't come up with a way to identify who should be targeted without imposing on the legitimate operations. So that's one reason to go with license the proprietors first. That, in my opinion, because it will let us identify how many operations there are and what percentage of them are illegitimate, which at the moment, we don't know how many operations there are. We don't know how many of them are good and how many are bad. We don't have that information at all. Anyway, any other comments, questions, Representative Evil?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, both these bills came through ED&A on the consent calendar, and both of them passed on a voice vote. So it seems to me that ED&A must have seen a difference between the two, and both were equally recommended. And so from a policy standpoint, it seems to me that their thought was that we would, I did have a question for Deanne, but anyway. It seems to me that they felt, and I realize Representative Leon is the chair, but the committee felt that both were needed. And so I just was going to ask Deanne Juris what she sees the difference as.
Thank you for the question. I will try. I do not have the legislation in front of me, so I will try to just speak in broad strokes. I think one, the primary distinction I think between the two is that one contemplates an additional credential of a proprietor, a person who owns an establishment with more than one massage therapist. That would be 1458. It is the individual person holding an additional credential. Thank you so much. 1469 contemplates the licensing of the place, of the facility. And so there's the coordination of that is different. So again, it's licensing a person saying, I personally meet these qualifications versus the actual facility. So I think that's a primary distinction. So theoretically, both pieces could continue to move forward and at the end of it create two new credentials, one for the person owning it and for the actual place, or one or the other. I think there was a significant push, a focus in two different areas. One was saying, let's go after the bad actors, trying to get the individual person. Let's try to crack down on what those requirements are and get more information on the individual. The second is, let's get in there in the inspections. I do think that the primary purpose of OPLC, it's right to protect public health and safety. So one of the reasons that is used to justify an inspection is to say, this is really a health and safety metric. We want to make sure this is a sanitary place. I'm not sure that that is the focus of this conversation, but a facilities inspection is the instrument to remedy that public health, safety, cleanliness piece. So that piece of it was removed because it is very costly to do that level of enforcement. And so it was left with just creating criteria, not for inspections, but just for the place itself. And then a complaint could be filed against the facility, not necessarily just the individual.
Representative Leon.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to repeat again the path of both of these bills coming through ED&A. There were two different viewpoints on how to address it. The one to find, because we've been told that the individuals doing this can't be tracked down because we don't know who they are. It was a streamlined path to make sure that we know those people who are operating them so that it's a low burden on those who are operating legitimate establishments. But it's one that if this doesn't deter the bad establishments, law enforcement will be able to go after them. The other one is the process to license that establishment with it. There wasn't full agreement on which one people wanted, but we also understood that there'd be a difference in cost. They were not combined into one bill because either one could stand on their own or they could work together. Bringing them forward to find out what the actual cost of implementation here in finance and determine if the cost of doing this makes a significant difference in order to address the underlying issue, which is human trafficking in illicit massage establishments, is worth the cost to the state and those licensees. And since that was largely a financial decision, because inspections are already permitted under OPLC statute for any any licensee, we felt that bringing this forward to allow you to evaluate the cost and see how the cost would impact that underlying issue of human trafficking and putting the bad guys in prison, we thought we would bring that financial part to you.
Thank you. Okay, Representative Manning, do you have a few words for us?
Thank you. Representative Manuel Rockin, 25 Salem. I'm here in place of the prime sponsor. He's dealing with a family matter. So as far as the bill cost is concerned, you heard that they can get away without having the paralegal. So if you remove section 18 from the bill with an amendment, that would nearly eliminate the cost of it, making it almost zero. The difference between the two bills is only licensing the business owner is already how illicit businesses are operate, and it is exactly what traffickers like to see and already know how to get around that. What this bill is proposing is essentially the IMB business model.
Excuse
Traffickers,
me, could you be a little more clear on which bill you're talking about at which time?
1469, that's what I'm here to speak on. Do
Okay.
you want me to speak on 58? Because I don't have a whole lot of information.
Okay, so you're only talking about 1469.
Yeah,
Thank you,
this
please
here is the
continue.
difference between the two of them. Is that okay?
That's fine. You just said the bill and I
oh,
wasn't
yeah,
sure
I
which bill it
apologize.
was.
So the difference between 1458. The bill is proposing a business model where traffickers who establish these IMBs essentially have experts typically referred to as paper owners or paper husbands. This person, it tends to be an older male, usually paid either through sexual services as the expense of the trafficker, or individuals are a kickback. Only licensing the business owner is a loophole that IMB businesses models already know how to exploit. You will not usually find any flags on who they put on paper as the business owner. You are not able to catch any of the exploitation and able to stop it through the results or to stop the systemic issue. The paper husband is likely to always be always going to be an upstanding citizen with no criminal record, and is often part of the trafficking or exploitation, but not the leader. Sometimes this can even be trafficking victims or someone who has been set up for take the fall. Both bills can work together, but we don't believe that 1458 is going to be effective on its own. I do know that the Derry Police Chief supports 1469. And as far as the law enforcement first question that came up, when that was presented in the other committee, that was talking about law enforcement being able to use 1469 to go into these establishments without a warrant. And that's not the case. So they would still have to do their investigation just like they would today. They'd have to get information, they'd have to get a warrant signed by a judge before they can go in. So neither one of these bills is really a law enforcement first bill because they would both still require investigations and warrants in order to take any law enforcement action. So that's basically the difference between the two bills.
Representative Munn?
I guess I'm wondering if you're, if you have a concern with the definition of massage establishment proprietor. Are there changes that could or should be made to that so we catch the people that you're referencing?
In 58, in 1458,
Right.
it should be the business, not the proprietor. The proprietor is just a person. The business will be the actual business. They move these businesses. Once you shut one down, they just open up somewhere else. So licensing the business makes it harder to do that and easier to track. And the goal ultimately is to let them know that New Hampshire is not the place to open these businesses up, that it's difficult to do it. And it's not, they can't just move from one town to the next town, one business, one building to the next building.
Anyone else? Comments, questions, concerns, Representative Abel?
Thank you for being here. Were 1458 and 1469 heard on the same day, or they were?
I believe they were, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I believe they were.
Could, in terms of who showed up to support what bill, wasn't there a great deal more support for 1469 at the time?
I believe there was, yes. That's how I understand it. And I also know that at least the Derry Police Chief and there were a lot more stakeholders involved in 69, a lot more sponsors, bipartisan sponsors on both sides of the wall. Yes.
Representative Abel, I can vouch for the fact that I was
Yeah.
there, and the two bills were heard back to back. And one reason that people may have spoken only on one rather than both when they supported both was that it was a rather lengthy hearing, and many people just wanted to talk about the horrors of human trafficking rather than about the bills. You've been there. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Representative Brun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed that Representative Sweeney is a co-sponsor on 1469. I'd be interested to know your insight about the bills.
I recall being asked to co-sponsor a bill to help fight human trafficking in massage parlors, and I co-sponsored the bill. I have not tracked along the progression of the bills. So since the conversation back in November I had, today is really the first time this conversation is coming up, and I wouldn't say this area is my area of expertise or my bailiwick. So I'm certainly, I think, supportive of the policy direction that both of these bills are moving forward to. Maybe we move forward with one, study another, and sort of like the what the director said and what the chairman of EDNA said to figure out the full cost that we can and maybe look at it next year. That's my response, I would say. And I like Representative Mannion and what the points that he's made and the sponsor team. I think there's definitely a problem here that we're just trying to solve, and we've waded a lot into the policy here today, when really I think figuring out what the actual costs of both these bills are is paramount for not only just today, but what we do on Tuesday in full finance.
That's a very good point, and I'm going to suggest that we recommend passing 1458 because although Representative Mannion and others are concerned it might not be enough, it might be. It doesn't cost us anything to try, and it's not much of a burden on anybody to do it. So I think as a cheap way that might help us get some of those bad actors identified and charged, and also will give us a much better count on how many establishments there are in the state, which we would need to get the full analysis. I think we can agree that that's a good first step. And then on 1469, I'm concerned that it's still too much of a burden on the legitimate establishments, but I think we ought to at least consider it. I like Representative Sweeney's suggestion of studying it. We can discuss that. Representative Munns?
I'm just wondering, based on what Representative Mannion said, if in your amendment, we should say massage establishment proprietor means the person operating and or owning a massage establishment. It would exclude if it's a lease situation, it would exclude the property owner, but it would include the business owner.
Yes, exactly. That, in fact, I'm beginning to think my amendment is not appropriate because at the moment, 1458 unamended says that the proprietor must have a massage license, which is normally the case in a legitimate operation, even if they're only there to cover an appointment when somebody gets sick. They would have a license.
Doesn't cover the situation that Representative Mannion mentioned. You could have an owner.
It is, if you look at the original bill, not the amendment, it specifically says the proprietor is the person operating it, daily responsible for daily operation and hiring massage therapists. I mean, that's the person you want to get. The person who is there every day making sure these people are under control.
Is it? I mean, I don't agree with you that we want to get that person, but is that the person we really want to get, or do we want to get the owner?
We want to get all of them.
But there's nothing in here that gets the owner.
No, there's nothing in either bill that gets the owner. Well, if we eliminate the middle management, they're going to be in trouble. The owners are either going to have to step down or find some less qualified people to fill in. You've got to have somebody there cracking the whip.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also point out that without the amendments, you're less likely to have the paper husbands because they're unlikely to get a massage license or a bodywork license in addition to the proprietor license. So this is narrowing the funnel in a way that's less impactful for legitimate businesses, but closing the door on the bad actors. And I don't think that part got a lot of airtime. So if you missed that part, no problem.
Yeah, I think you're right. You can't get somebody that's just there filling out the forms doesn't want to have to get a massage license, which has specific requirements for training and continuing education. And I believe there's a criminal background check, although I'm not positive.
Believe that one can be conducted for a massage therapist, but it's not required. It's not mandated in the statutes, but within the overall OPLC laws, they're able to look into the criminal background because those with criminal history or otherwise inappropriate conduct are
Yeah.
able to lose their license.
So I think I'm going to ignore my amendment and go on saying that the proprietor must have a massage license and the specific proprietor license, which includes the background check,
Got to make it as difficult as possible.
and make it as difficult as possible. Yes, indeed. And I think that will not not interfere with the legitimate businesses very much at all. Director Jury.
Thank you. Yes, the honorable now. I appreciate it. I apologize. I just want to make sure we're really clear. We are authorized under certain conditions to do a state criminal records check. If you want a fingerprint from the FBI, which would do a national check, which I'm assuming is probably in this realm, that would need to be very specifically authorized by statute. That has to be reviewed by the FBI and approved for us to even do that. And so I would strongly recommend that the committee look at other language that does that authorization for that FBI background check. It is.
If you look on page 3,
Mhm.
Line 10, excuse me, I just saw that, lines 15 through 18, it says, social security number, no prior conviction under RSA such and such, or similar laws in other states, as verified by a background check conducted by the Department of Safety. Is that a full fingerprinted? No.
No.
Well, that's, what do we need to add to make sure that it is? Because I believe that should be the intent.
That was my understanding. That's why I did jump to. I don't
Oh, no,
typically
thank
run
you.
to the table here.
'Cause I assumed
yes.
that- I looked at that and said, well, that looks like that's a full background check, and that's what we want.
Yes, I apologize. Let me find. We are in the midst of review. This statute has been changed several times. We've had some rejected by the FBI, and we are not authorized to collect those. So we have made some reviews. So let me. You guys are meeting on Tuesday, so this afternoon, let me get you language that I can work with the Department of Safety on what has been approved that we know that we can insert here. It would still need to be reviewed in a new section, but I can get the committee that language, or perhaps your budget assistance here.
Representative Griffin.
Yeah, I'm really, I really think the staged approach where we pass 1458, probably with the amendment, and I think we'll learn a lot in the process of doing that. And I think as people get registered, any weaknesses in the system can be addressed in the future. I really, at this point, don't see a need for 1469.
Okay. Representative Land, you have a comment?
Yes, if I may, I'll work with Director Juris, and it may make sense to have the FBI background check plus the state check in case the FBI check is hung up. So we have something that would be effective in addition to that.
Okay. Very good. You put my name on the amendment, please? Representative Rung?
So would that affect the fiscal note as well with the FBI check?
It shouldn't.
Okay, I thought
That's
you said it
already
was.
allowable.
Okay,
And generally, we charge the applicant for the cost of the FBI check.
okay,
It's $50 or $60, I think.
okay.
Make sure that put in that they're paying the cost.
Okay. Okay, and one other comment, Madam Chair. I get the sense that there's a lot of competition between 1469 and 1458, when the goal is the same, to shut down these sex trafficking or businesses, organizations, and really damage the network. And I don't know why it didn't happen in committee, but I would really urge that the sponsors of both bills get together and see if there could be one comprehensive bill that we don't have to say, well, let's try it and see if it works, because now that's in statute. I'd prefer to have something go into statute that was comprehensive, that was very thoroughly vetted by both law enforcement, licensing, and all the stakeholders involved. I think what I heard is that there's no, one bill doesn't exclude the other, so I'm gonna be supporting both bills. But I do hope that, we can get together and make sure that that together, they're both very effective in addressing the problem.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. They're both they would both be in statute, so it would be legitimate. So I'm going to move ought to pass on House Bill 1458 with the addition of an amendment vetted by Director Jurius to make sure that the criminal background check, we all agree, should be there, is there. Is that clear enough for the LBA?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Representative Griffin, it's your second, thank you. Any other comments? Representative Munt?
That background check language will be for state and federal.
Absolutely. That's what we thought was there when we looked at it, but the FBI's been very persnickety lately on the specific language of the statute authorizing the checks. So we want to make sure it's today's language. Any other comments? Okay. Representative Leishman, if you'd call the roll.
Certainly, Madam Chair, on your motion to move 1458 with an amendment being offered before we vote in full committee next Tuesday for a background check amendment. Representative McGuire.
Yes.
Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
Representative Weiler. Representative Ebel.
Yes.
We'll vote yes. Representative Munns.
Yes.
Representative Rung.
Yes.
We have a vote of 8-0, Madam Chair.
All right. Excellent. I will, when I get the amendment, I'll be able to present it to the full committee. All right. Moving on to 1469, which we have discussed in some detail.
Madam Chair, you only voted on the committee amendment, so you have to vote on ought to pass as amended.
We should have probably done a show of hands on, well,
What,
because we don't have a paper amendment.
we don't have a paper amendment, so, but we know what the intent is. Fine, you wish to, which one do you want us to vote on now?
I think we all know where we stand, but if you want to show.
All right, let's vote on the amendment since we didn't. Those in favor of the amendment? Okay, that looks like 8-0 show of hands to make sure that the amendment does what we think it did already.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
on 1469, do we want to do the same amendment for that? Do we need it for that?
let's see. Let's see where they got that there. Qualifications. It doesn't call for any background checks, as far as I can tell.
Correct.
It does call for licenses, right?
Yes?
So,
Yeah, that's licensed in New Hampshire, sole proprietor. Yes. It leaves any background check under rulemaking authority, which is kind of wrong, I think. Representative Land, do you have an excuse about that?
Actually, I was going to speak that it sounds like it's licensing the establishment, which might be a business or something else, as opposed to the individual operating the establishment. Both of these will play together. They're written so that if both pass, they will flow into the law. But 1469 is the establishment license, which is the business, and not the individual. So I don't know how you background check a business.
Okay, Representative Ebel and then Ron.
Yeah, not to be all formulaic about it, but so we're closing the work session and the exec session on 1458, and we're opening the work session on 1469. I
Yes.
want to be legal in what.
Well,
Okay.
actually, work sessions can flow from one bill to another. I've
All
done
right,
enough
all
of
right.
them
Well,
in
I
other
don't,
committees.
I just want to make sure. So I had an idea that I might also propose an amendment to remove the section that, in 1469, that, I think it was the enforcement person that required an additional individual, which kind of drove the differences between the two fiscal notes. So that was a thought that I had, if the fiscal note issue was one that caused some people consternation. So, Diane, are you here?
She's,
Oh, all right.
that section
Anyways,
is
I
section
believe
18.
that's what she said. Good job.
You're correct, and that is section 18 of the bill.
Right.
Okay,
And-
so,
And I believe she said that it could work without that.
okay. Representative Mannion, you have a
Thank you.
comment on that?
Yeah, that's the information that we have, that without the enforcement part, the paralegal would not be as necessary, so eliminating section 18 might theoretically eliminate the fiscal note, and that's workable.
It will also eliminate the inspections that you want to be able to do. So, I mean, it's kind of the point of the bill is to be able to do the inspections. Is that correct?
I believe she said the inspections could be done, but there won't be aggressive investigations.
I apologize. You're gonna have to repeat the question. I was on the phone with safety trying to get that approved language for you. So
The
I
concern,
apologize.
the question was, if we eliminate the paralegal profession in section 18,
Mhm.
that obviously eliminates the associated cost.
yes,
Does it cramp your style in doing investigations?
no. I could say more, but I don't need to. The answer is no.
The answer is no. Okay, thank you. Yes, Robert.
Was the town of Derry supporting more one than another? I mean, my impression was that, thanks, Deanne, that a lot of them came out for 1469.
Having been there, they came out, they were in favor of both. They were also concerned about a clause that was deleted by the committee that invalidated local regulations on massage establishments, which are licensed by the town as businesses. And the town of Derry has come up with some plans with some at least moderately effective ways of shutting them down. And they didn't want to have that taken away. So that has been deleted from, I don't remember what bill it was in, it could have been both, but it's gone. Representative Brown?
I think this came up earlier, but I just want to bring to the committee's attention that on 1469, on page 2, beginning at line 32, it does require a person who owns, manages, or an agent to open, establish, or conduct or maintain the establishment. They have to have the establishment license, but they also have to be a licensed massage therapist. I know that was, we wanted to ensure that these establishments were run by people who were licensed by the state as a massage therapist. So that is in 1469.
Okay, well, it's also in
And it's also in the other.
1458,
Mhm.
and the amendment that would take it out has been
Mhm.
ignored.
Mhm.
Comments? Representative Sweeney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just considering the conversations and what we've heard, maybe today the right motion for me is interim study. Perhaps to Representative Rung's suggestion earlier, if the sponsors of both get together over the weekend and prepare an amendment that we might be able to consider in full finance, maybe Tuesday's motion is different. But I think right now interim study is the right path to put this on, unless there's a really worked out amendment that's not just on the fly like this, that might have a different outlook on Tuesday. So if you'd allow it, I'd move interim study right now on
All
1469.
right, is there a second? Representative Leishman seconds, okay. Any comments on that? Representative Braun?
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with that because there is no conflict in policy with passing both of these. And that's what we should not be in the policy weeds. And I think the fiscal note on one is, it actually, even without it being amended, it doesn't even hit until fiscal year 2028. So I think we should respect the vote of the policy committee, pass both of these. And if there needs to be some modification because of further study, then have that done in tandem with both of these.
Representative Leishman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have gone way into the weeds, in my opinion, on both these bills. And I certainly support Representative Ebel's suggestion of removing Section 18, but again, that's a significant change to what came from the policy committee. So I think interim study might be the best deal, and if people can come together by Tuesday, we can take it up then.
Anyone else? Representative Ebel?
I will be talking to some people to make sure that this is all right, but I am going to bring well, let me just back up in response to what Representative Leishman said. I agree with you that this is sort of delving into the weeds a little bit, but we're also the finance committee, and if we're concerned about the costs, and if that's one of the leading issues here, I'm very happy to prepare an amendment that we can consider on Tuesday that changes the fiscal note and removes the enforcement individual. I really feel strongly that we should be doing both, and I fully respect one of the co-sponsors on the bill, but I'll be voting against the interim study motion, but understand that we'll be continuing the discussion in anticipation of Tuesday.
I'd like to comment that I'm supporting that issue, not just because of the immediate cost to the state by adding a person, but because of the effect it would have on legitimate massage and bodywork establishments. As Representative Land has said several times, we don't know how many of them there are. We don't know where they are. We don't know what fraction of them are not legitimate. So if we're starting to put in a licensing requirement for the establishments and requiring them to get that license, depending on how many of them there are and what the requirements for the license are, which are, a lot of them are left to rulemaking, that could be a severe burden to our neighbors who are running legitimate massage establishments. I mean, I live in a small town and there are at least 4 that I know of, and they're all legitimate. I've checked with our police chief and he says it's easy to tell the ones that aren't. So I'm concerned about not what it will do to the state or to our budgets, but what it will do to the businesses involved. And that's my major concern, and that's why I've argued against licensing requirements from establishments for the last 5-6 years, every time that's come up. All right. Anyone else? Representative Braun?
Were there any establishments that came forward, do you know, at the public hearing that were opposed to 1469 because of the cost it may put on them?
The only establishments that reported in were in the town of Derry, which has been fighting an infestation of illegitimate massage establishments, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get those guys out of business. The smaller operations did not testify. Is that agree with your recollection? Okay. All right. Any other comments? So the motion is interim study by Representative Sweeney. And the clerk can call the roll.
And I will call you last since you're chair today.
Thank you. You can forget me as is the standard procedure.
All right, on the motion of interim study, which was offered by Representative Sweeney and seconded by myself on 1469, Representative Griffin,
Yes.
Representative Sweeney,
Yes.
Representative Weiler,
Yes.
Representative Evil,
No,
I will vote yes. Representative Munns,
No.
Representative Rung,
No.
Chair McGuire,
Yes,
5-3, interim study.
all right. So Representative Sweeney, you'll bring this to the full committee?
Yep.
And if Representative Ebel comes up with an amendment, we will consider it at the time. Okay, moving right along. House Bill 1576. Okay, we're all through with the massage stuff, thank you.
You'll
If
need a
any-
massage now.
Absolutely, yes, I can recommend a couple of legitimate operations. Don't know any illegitimate ones. All right. Does someone have a comment or motion or something on this?
Madam Chair.
Representative Sweeney.
I know this bill is also a bipartisan bill that came out of the committee unanimously. I don't think we have to have the same sort of level of discussion jumping in the weeds. I'm happy to move on to pass as presented on 1576.
I'll second it.
Okay, Representative Sweeney suggests, okay, well, whomever.
we'll make it bipartisan.
All right, thank you. All right, so this, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Not more than I've already said. It was a good bipartisan bill that came out of the policy committee and had support on the House floor. It's just one of those ones that we can just quickly move with and support passage to the full
Okay,
House.
Representative Griffin and Representative Evil. Do you have a comment?
Again, I looked at the way that it came through the House. I looked at the description of the bill. There's a great deal of consensus on it. There is a bit of a fiscal note on it. I didn't know if folks wanted to discuss it, but if you're comfortable with it, I'm more than happy to move ahead with a much needed bill. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Munns?
Yeah, I guess I had the same reaction. I mean, it seems like there's general agreement on the bill, but if there is somebody here that could talk, or perhaps talk about the fiscal note, it would be interesting to just hear that.
Is there someone who knows the fiscal note in detail? Yes. I was noticing that it's nicely gradated so that we don't slam into enforcement immediately.
My name's Jessica Coron. I'm the new Assistant Commissioner at the Department of Corrections, and I'm joined by our Director of External Affairs, Jane Graham. The Department of Corrections is in support of the spirit of this bill. Our collections team currently collects 13,000 cases on behalf of 21,000 victims. We're asking in the fiscal note to add an additional 3 collections officers as well as an accountant. And the reason for that is because there are several elements of the bill that are going to require further operations. I can go into detail about that if you'd like.
Since
Sure, we have 13,000 collections cases on behalf of 21,000 victims. We currently have 4 collections officers, or 3.5, I think technically. And we're asking for 3 additional, as well as an accountant.
And the fiscal note doesn't mention it, but I presume this will result in increased restitution payments to the victims?
In theory, we would expect that there would be, yes.
Okay, so that's the plan. Do you have a plan if it doesn't result in increased payments to the victims? Or when would you know?
We would know it at the end of the fiscal year. Right now, we've taken about $2 million on behalf of victims. With additional collections officers, we would be able to do, additional work in terms of financial evaluations, enforcement, as well as additional disbursement.
Okay, so we'll make a note that this starts in fiscal year June 27. Okay, so by the end of fiscal 2028, you'd be able to give us an answer?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Make a note to the members of the finance committee at that time to look at it and see if it's worth it. But you can't tell till you try. Okay. Anyone else? Representative Munns.
Yeah, could you, I mean, it sounds like you're essentially doubling the staff of case managers. Can you point to the specific provisions of the bill that would mandate that additional staffing?
Sure, and it is worth mentioning that at one point, over the last decade, the Department of Corrections did have 11 collections officers. So we've significantly lost personnel within that department. The specific elements of the bill that we think having the additional collections officers would allow us to comply with include under financial evaluations, we would be required under this legislation to reevaluate financial situations more frequently, financial situations of the offenders. Victims would be required to be notified with every 30 days if a change has occurred with their offender's financial situation. We would have manual reevaluations required every 12 months. Quarterly statements to victims would be required under this legislation. Within the enforcement piece, there are additional provisions that would require additional manpower to include liens on property. We would have to evaluate real estate transactions in order to take those funds on behalf of victims. We'd have to intercept taxes, which would require additional support. We would have increased coordination with prosecutors in the courts, which in terms of time, significant. We have 11 superior courts in the state and 33 circuit and district courts throughout the state in which our collections officers travel to almost on a daily basis in order to support victims. We also, the legislation requires us to do wage garnishment, which is something that we already do. However, when their wage garnishment is enforced, it causes offenders to change jobs more frequently. So we expect to see an increase of responsibility there as well.
So to sum it up, it requires you to do the things you're already doing more frequently and more intensively. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
There are additional provisions of the bill that we are not already doing. And the elements that I just outlined, like liens on property, intercepting of taxes, those are new enforcement tools that the legislation will give us.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments, issues? All right then, Representative Sweeney has moved on to pass, and the clerk can call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the motion of ought to pass on 1576, which was made by Representative Sweeney, seconded by Representative Ebel. Representative Griffin,
Yes.
Representative Sweeney,
Yes.
Representative Weiler, Representative Ebel.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Representative Munns,
Yes.
Representative Rung,
Yes.
Chair McGuire.
Yes.
8-0.
All right, Representative Sweeney, you'll bring this one to the full committee?
Yes.
All right. 1477, relative to the permitting and regulations of anchored seasonal floating platforms on public waters. All right, does anybody? Representative Griffin, do you have a comment on this?
I'm not in favor of this bill. It seems to me like, we're just increasing the size of the bureaucracy here. And, we're registering everything that moves, and now we're registering things that don't move. So I don't believe I'm gonna support this bill.
All right, do you have a motion? Yes,
May I speak before a motion's made?
sure.
Okay, I have to, first of all, I would be paying this fee if this bill were to pass, and I'm also a co-sponsor on this. But I feel very strongly, not just in the policy area, but in the fiscal area, because our water bodies are public property. They belong to the state. And we would no sooner allow someone to put a trampoline up in Bear Brook Park then we should allow them to put a trampoline up in the waters of the state that belong to the public. So people like myself get personal use out of public property without investing or paying a fee to address issues that are created by that structure. So I think particularly with the growth of toxic cyanobacteria blooms throughout the state that affect health of so many people. They've been linked to ALS, and now they've been linked to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. We need to have the resources in place to be able to mitigate those blooms. Just this past week, the voters in Amherst approved a $100,000 expenditure at their town meeting to go toward cyanobacteria bloom mitigation at Babusick Lake, which is also shared with the town of Merrimack. The abutters of that lake are contributing about $300,000 to $400,000 for that treatment. But some of these larger lakes that are showing chronic toxic blooms, and I'm including in that Lake Winnipesaukee now. There are areas of Lake Winnipesaukee that for the past 3 years have experienced blooms. We need to put in place some funding to address that. And I think the people who are most affected by those blooms should have a stake in the game. And by enforcing a fee for structures that they put on public land or public waters, which are free to them right now, I think is a reasonable thing to do, that they should be paying for use of those public lands. We make people who use boats in public waters pay a registration fee. It should be no different than people installing structures on public water to have to pay a fee too. And I will tell you, just from my little lake, there are a lot of structures, and this would really be a positive revenue source for not just the cyanobacteria fund, but also for the marine navigation fund. I would, though, entertain an amendment to this bill that would take some of those fees, and put them to the administration costs. So there's no cost to the general fund in administering this, that some of the money raised from those fees would then go to support that administration. But so I would like to support an OTPA motion on this.
Okay, Representative Abel.
I'm sorry, I have so much paper here. Was there an amended fiscal note?
We don't have it.
Yeah, I thought somebody sent it to me. Yeah, there was one done on February 9th. You don't have a updated one in front of you? No.
No.
Let us make copies real quick, but there is one.
Okay, yes, because
Yeah, that would be
Important.
helpful. And no, 'cause this one says November 30th.
this one says as introduced.
All right, up top, yeah, I should say as amended. Jack's gonna make some copies for the
Okay.
committee.
Representative McDonald, do you want to enlighten us? Excuse me, first Representative Griffin.
Yes, I'd like to respond in that we're talking about a $50 fee here. And I really believe that the bureaucracy that'll be set up to collect that $50 fee and find out who has a floating platform and who doesn't, and all the accounting involved in it and everything, it's gonna be hard to make any money to put anywhere other than to cover the costs of the thing, and we'd be lucky to do that. I don't think we're that efficient that we can go out and register floating platforms for $50 and handle all the paperwork that's required, the licensing, the accounting of funds. And I think it's a dream that some of that money is gonna end up helping the weed problem in the various,
Actually, the
Thanks.
bill as written dedicates all the money to those funds and does not cover the cost of collection.
and
That would be
and
a
that's-
general fund impact. Excuse me, Representative. Excuse me.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that Department of Safety did not state that there was any cost for them to administer this new fee. So I don't think there's an amount that we can allocate towards them because there was no expenditures that they requested in the fiscal.
Well,
note.
if the as introduced fiscal note says, if passed, the department states it would need 2 new positions to implement the program. And that's what is in the fiscal note. I'm not worried about the cost to produce the decals.
Madam Chair,
I just,
Captain Dunleavy's here from Department of Marine Patrol. He could probably give us some comment and address as far as the burden on administration.
Well, all right.
Representative
We're
McGuire.
going into the weeds again. But first, Representative McDonald, as he's the sponsor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to mention Representative Griffin's comments. We currently have a mooring program on the 5 major lakes and also 2 smaller lakes where people are required to purchase a mooring decal. We've had that since I think 1985 somewhere, and then that's been very successful, raising the money and promoting the mooring program itself. This bill is supported by New Hampshire Lakes, the New Hampshire Marine Trades Association, and I believe pretty much all the lake associations throughout the state. As you can see, there was an amendment down at the bottom that I got some calls about the folks down in the seacoast that do oystering, and I tried to address those issues. And since that time, I haven't heard any other complaints. But it's a good bill. I believe a couple of years ago, Senator Bradley put $1 million into the account in the Cyanobacteria Fund. That's rapidly becoming depleting. This bill would help maintain that fund without any cost to the state. As far as an estimate of how many of these floats there are in the state, I can count probably 15 or 20 just in the Wolfboro area. And I'm not talking about little small floats like rafts. I'm talking about these things that blow up and can go as high as 10 or 15 feet, trampolines. I'm sure some of you have seen them in some of your lakes, but they're all over Lake Winnipesaukee and all the other lakes. And I think as a citizen, the lakes belong to everybody. And I think if you're going to use a lake, much like going into a state park, you should pay some kind of fee to have that opportunity to use it for that particular service. Thank you.
Representative Weiler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there's already a mooring decal, you say, and that's one of the things that this patrol is looking for, right?
Yes, sir.
So does this change anything, except maybe a different kind of decal?
You'd have to ask Captain Dunleavy. I don't think it would. I think it would be the same decal, same type of thing, same type of setup.
That would seem to indicate they don't need any new people.
I think what he's looking for is the increase in the walk-ins and mail to get the program going. But again,
We'll let him speak for
yeah,
himself.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Director Dunleavy? Thank you, Representative.
Good morning, Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee. My name is Tim Dunleavy. I'm from the Department of Safety, Division of State Police Marine Patrol Unit, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I've heard a few, but and I can expound on those if you'd like.
Please, we're concerned about the implementation cost.
Thank you. The Department of Safety submitted for 2 positions, but I submit to you, this is an unknown for us at this point. And the reason I say that is because, yes, we do permit moorings between 5,000 and 6,000 per year, but that mooring permit law only applies to 8 bodies of water in our state. We know that the devices that you're talking about this morning are on all of our lakes. This bill applies to all of our public waters greater than 10 acres in size. And so we are looking at 5,000, 6,000 moorings. Not every resident has one. Not every resident has an inflatable device. Some have both, seasonal platform that is. And so we are anticipating 2 to 3, maybe 4 times the number of moorings with these inflatable seasonal platforms or seasonal platforms. Right now, we dedicate a position and a half to processing between 5,000 and 6,000 moorings. Each year, a person submits the application for their renewal decal, and we then mail them the decal. But when they initially apply for their application for the permit, there are already rules not only for moorings, but the laws and rules already exist for seasonal platforms that have very specific requirements. And because this was an issue where if someone could access the public waters, they could just install one of these devices before rulemaking and laws of just a few years ago, you now are required to be a shorefront property owner or have a legal access to the water. So we need to review those applications to make sure that those requirements and in this undue proliferation of these inflatable devices just showing up in front of a private citizen's home because the owner of the device could access that water by a nearby public boat ramp and just drop it in front of a private property's owner. We had to reel it in. And so we need to ensure when that application comes in for an inflatable climbing wall that indeed it's going in front of someone who owns the frontage, that it's placed properly in front of their frontage and not infringing on an abutter or the general public. So it's that review process, the mailing of the decals, that we believe will require 2 people ultimately, whether it will up front or maybe we'll find the numbers aren't as high and we won't need that many. It's just an unknown.
So can I summarize what you said, that this bill applies the license requirement to every body of water rather than just specific ones, and that the requirements for a floating platform changed a few years ago, so you need to essentially audit every platform in the state other than on those 8 lakes to make sure that they comply with the new laws in order to give them this decal.
That's correct, Madam Chair, especially if there is a permit attached. Because once that permit is attached and that permit's issued by the Department of Safety, we need to ensure we're complying by statute and administrative rule for the placement of those.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your doing so. Representative Sweeney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here to answer questions on this. How often for all of the bodies of water in the state, not just Winnipesaukee, but the smaller ones, lakes and ponds throughout, do we actively put like a marine patrol boat in the water to, would be the ones responsible for finding these platforms that aren't registered?
Thank you for your question, Representative. It depends upon the body of water. We routinely touch about 975 of our public waters with an officer each year. We are oftentimes visiting a body of water when, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. We may not visit it that often, but we get a call. Winnipesaukee, we have 5 or 6 boats on a weekend, day and night shift. So it varies from body of water to body of water. But certainly when there is an issue, we're dispatching regularly.
So would it be fair to say that you're anticipating that you might require additional marine patrol effort as well?
I would say that the enforcement of this permit requirement would fall under the same category as our enforcement of moorings. To be honest with you, it's the perfect rainy day job for an officer. The boating traffic is minimal on a rainy day, and it is a perfect opportunity for an officer to go along the shoreline, checking for decals. These devices are easily accessible on the water and enforce the requirements. We also look at this as an enforcement that's just seeking compliance, and that's how we approach the mooring program, where we find somebody without a decal, we simply leave a sticker on the boat or on the mooring ball itself, giving them a week or two, depending on the time of the season, to just reach out to us. Oftentimes, the decal's at home in Massachusetts on the kitchen counter. So we're just looking for compliance.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear. Won't add extra marine patrol because that's probably a lot more expensive. Representative Wrong and then Abel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Captain Dunleavy, for being here. It's good to see you again. I just want to correct an erroneous statement I said earlier. I assumed that the expenses of implementing this bill, if it were to pass, were going to come from the general fund. But I see in the amended fiscal note that it's actually coming from the Navigation Safety Fund. So is that, I'm assuming you had something to do with this fiscal note, Captain Dunleavy, is that true?
I was aware of it. The new Marine Patrol Bureau Commander who took my place after I retired is the one that did that, submitted that. But yes, the Navigation Safety Fund is the umbrella fund that Marine Patrol draws its budget from.
Okay, so that the fee goes half to cyanobacteria mitigation and half to marine safety, which includes enforcement of this bill. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. It's not a burden on those of us who don't.
The general
use
fund.
the lakes. Okay. Representative Abel.
I have to say, I just have to put my oar in the water on this one. Sorry. I come from a region with a lot of lakes, and you have helped me quite a bit on some situations that we've faced there where people are getting into the right of way or the pathways for boats. And I will say from my own experience, the proliferation of these huge, and I mean huge, inflatables is really, really concerning. And sometimes they get lost. I mean, they get disconnected, they're floating around. And I understand from a capitalistic standpoint, I guess, there's a whole business that's thriving around these things. But from a safety standpoint, and from the standpoint of the impact of these floatables on the people that are using the lake who don't own them is really, I think, more than is necessary. We have people that have 4 and 5 of them in front of and they're, as you said, they can go up 30 feet. They have huge slides on them. They look like, ninja competition equipment. And it impacts the rest of the people on the lake, not just the passage, but also your experience as a member of the public on the lake. It's sort of a somewhat selfish use of the fact that they have all the shoreland and they're coming out 50, 60, 70 feet with their toys that nobody else can play on but them. So I fully support this bill, and I think we have to keep in mind that this came through a policy committee with a lot of support, and we should be talking about the money.
Yes. Representative Mund.
Thank you. And thank you for clarifying that money goes to the Navigation Safety Fund, and that's where the enforcement would come from. So following up on that, so the fiscal note indicates that, in the first year, it's $178,000. Is that the gross number before the additional monies from the Navigation Safety Fund are applied against that?
Yes, Representative, that would be the case. That would be the upfront process of hiring, establishing the program that would be taken over by the Navigation Safety Fund, as I understand it, once the revenues are generated.
So we could expect that certainly in maybe the later years, that the numbers in the fiscal note of the impact will be less.
Yes, and I believe that's what was
And that is what
reflected in
shows
the
in
original.
fiscal note.
Is that why it goes down from 178,000 to 144?
Yes, that is my understanding.
All right.
And again, I submit to you, we don't know the number yet of permits that'll be requested for us. That's an anticipation based on the existing mooring program.
Okay. But the Navigation Safety Fund has enough on hand to handle this bulge in effort. Is that correct?
Yes, at this time it does.
Okay, glad to hear it. Representative Rung?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed that Amy Smagula is here from DES, and I was wondering if we could ask her questions about the status of the Cyanobacteria Mitigation Fund.
She gave us some, a very nice written analysis, and unless someone has specific questions, we
Oh, I
can
see.
agree cyanobacteria is bad and it's expensive to mitigate. Yes, we have a, fiscal note pass there.
Can I just follow up on that last point? I'm sorry.
Yes.
So I mean, because you had mentioned that the Navigation Safety Fund has enough to make up for this new bulge. And there
It
was
has
an
enough
agreement.
to cover it, so they're not gonna be begging fiscal for $100,000 or whatever until the fees start coming in. They get continual fees from other sources.
Okay. So again, I mean, the way the way I'm reading the fiscal note is that there's a net additional cost of 178, 144, 150, but it sounds like there's not there may be an additional cost, but that's not coming out of general funds.
Correct.
Okay.
It should not affect general funds at all unless it turns out to be much more expensive to implement than they've estimated. In which case, we can do that. Representative Rung?
Oops, I have a question for Mrs. Magula. I noticed that you have $200,000 left in the fund, with 100,000 of that earmarked for a project in Bedford Amherst. Are there other projects you see forthcoming in the next year or two that would require funding? And I'm probably thinking about in-lake treatments that can run up to $500,000 each. I mean, how immediate is it to replenish these funds, in your opinion?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to comment, and committee members. My name is Amy Spagula, and I'm the Chief Aquatic Biologist at the Department of Environmental Services. Thank you for your question, Representative Rung. We do have dozens of water bodies in New Hampshire that bloom. In fact, as I mentioned in my handout, we have about 60 to 70 water bodies that bloom annually. So far, we have been able to manage 11 of those with the Cyanobacteria Mitigation Fund, supplemented by the American Rescue Plan Act. However, as I said, there are dozens that are not managed yet. So we do have many that are blooming and imminent. Arlington Mill Pond in Salem comes to mind as probably one that it will be soon in the queue. So yes, we don't see any additional funds coming in the near future. So any revenues to the program would go right back out towards funding the mitigation efforts in lake or watershed otherwise.
So that that fund does not have any regular source of input?
Unfortunately, at this time, no. It was a one-time appropriation from the legislature in 2023.
Okay, thank you. Representative Ryan?
So if there was, if this bill did not pass and there were no funds added to that fund, what would happen to those lakes that need treatment or need some mitigation? Would the blooms just continue, or would there be a burden on local property taxpayers to fund those projects?
If there are no state funds available to award to those entities, the burden would fall on local entities if they wish to do something in terms of mitigation. So a lake association or a municipality would need to put the money up, or no action would take place.
Okay.
Can I get the spelling of your last name?
Of course, it's S as in Sam, Magula. It's at the top of my handout as well.
And I didn't get,
Oh.
here we go.
I will bring you one.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else have comments
Madam
concerning?
Chair,
Yes,
are you
Representative.
ready for a motion?
Sure. Representative Griffin, you have a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to ITL 1477.
Is there a second? Okay. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
I think we covered it pretty well.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have comment? Representative Braun?
Yeah, I'm strongly against ITL. This is a very significant issue that's getting worse every year. This is fully funded by the revenues that would be produced. We heard even Arlington Mill Reservoir in Salem is highly impaired. They would be next on the list. Without this bill, we would not be able to fund those kind of projects, which will probably go up to $500,000. I believe that asking residents who use our lakes for free to install these platforms, these huge inflatables, is not too much to ask for them to share in the burden of maintaining lakes in a healthy manner. Thank you.
Anyone else? Representative Menz?
The only thing I would add to what Representative Rung said is that I looked online and to echo the point she made earlier about usage of public lands, we require people who want to have an annual pass to the state park system to pay $105. So paying $50 for the use of public waterway is not unreasonable.
Well, if the $50 is only if they choose to put a platform up. They're already paying, I presume, in higher property taxes than they would if their house was not adjacent to the line. I'm leaning toward supporting this because otherwise the burden of cleaning up the lakes falls on the property taxpayers of the vicinity who are not getting the full advantage of the lake. I know my town, we had a warrant article to support milfoil actually in Northwood Lake, which abuts the town. But most of the town gets no benefit whatsoever from that lake. So I think that having the people that are putting these platforms up on the lake are legitimately using the resources, and they should be paying for cleanup. Representative Weiler.
I agree that we should be charging for people that are using the public waters more than the rest of us. However, the charge that's in this bill doesn't cover all the expenses we've heard. Even if it's 50,000 shorefront properties and only 25% of them come in for that, and they charge $50 each, that doesn't even raise the money that we're told we're gonna spend to get all these permits out. So.
That's a very valid point. We should be charging enough to at least cover the cost of administering the program. So,
Madam Chair?
Representative Munns.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, the presentation we just heard suggests that, and the revenue assumptions are included on the handout, that 1477 would raise $300,000 for the cyanobacteria mitigation fund annually. And since that's half of the fee, that would suggest that it's going to raise $300,000 for enforcement, for the navigation fund, which would more than cover the cost, the cost of the extra personnel.
Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted, because Arlington Mill Reservoir in Salem was referenced, I do want to state for the record, the only constituents I had reach out to me about this bill live on Arlington Reservoir in Salem, and they asked me to oppose the bill, which is informing my vote on this. But you know, we might have difference of opinions on this, and that's perfectly fine in a functional republic. But I just wanted to put that out on the record that I did hear from constituents on the reservoir who specifically asked me to oppose it, and that's what's guiding my my vote today.
Thank you. Anyone else? Representative Ron?
I just want to state too that the estimation about the number of platforms that would be impacted, I think is actually very conservative. I think it's a lot more because just on my little lake in Moultonborough, there's a camp that probably puts 6 of these up every summer. And, you know, if we're just assuming there's 1 per property owner and 20% would have them, I think that's low. I think they'll actually be a lot more impacted.
And that comment makes me wonder how many of those platforms would actually comply with the existing rules that are not being enforced except on a few lakes. So that if there are individuals or businesses that are putting up excess number of platforms that would not be allowed to put up, would the rules allow 8 platforms in front of a camp?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. It would depend upon the person's frontage. The rules, we took a boat ride with the Resources Committee and they saw these devices, and some of the people who have 6 or 8 of these were spilling out into the frontage of neighbors. And so, hence the statute and supporting rules. So as long as they can limit these structures within the extent of their own frontage, they technically could have as many as they want, as long as they're not impeding on the use of the general public on that frontage and particularly their neighbors.
Thank you. Okay. Representative Weiler.
Question for the captain. Going back several years for people I knew that were in Marine Patrol. Who decides what lakes they're going to investigate when there's all these other 900 plus bodies that are not on your regular list?
For the question, Representative, as I said, we have routine patrols where officers will be checking. If it's on a smaller pond somewhere, where even Marine Patrol might have limited access, what we find particularly with moorings and with these floats when they're arbitrarily placed is oftentimes neighbors are policing themselves. You've infringed on a bass fisherman who suddenly can't fish a rock pile because there's a raft there, or a neighbor can't get out to their whatever by their powerboat, or can't start the youngster on water skis close to shore anymore because now there's a 17 by 20 inflatable iceberg.
I mean, we had, years ago, a Marine Patrol officer that lived in my town. People that had property on the lake said he was harassing them because some of them hadn't seen anybody from Marine Patrol before he was an officer. So I'm wondering if they can decide themselves, or do you have a schedule where you tell them where to go?
Thank you. We have lakes where we have permanent boats assigned, where the state either owns or leases dock slip. Those are going to be your larger, more popular, busier lakes. And then we have officers who tow a state patrol boat in maybe a county assignment or a portion of the county. And on a daily basis, their supervisor spells out what lakes they'll visit. However, one phone call for an accident interrupts that entire plan. And so that's the approach. Certainly.
Representative Griffin.
I wonder if I could ask a question. When you do a mooring, is it specified whether it's for a boat or a platform?
The current statutes, Representative, specifically say that no one can attach a boat to a platform. A mooring, yes, that's intended for securing the boat on the surface waters. But a platform cannot be used for any other device, whether it be aircraft, seaplane, boat, or otherwise. That answers your question.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you for the information. All right, so the motion is inexpedient to legislate by Representative Griffin, second by Representative Sweeney. Clerk can call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 1477 is ITL recommendation. Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
Representative Weiler. Representative Ebel.
No.
I will vote no. Representative Munns.
No.
Representative Rung.
No.
Chair McGuire.
Yes.
3 to 5.
I
I'm
got
sorry.
4 to 4.
4 to 4.
I voted.
I did, yeah. So we have Griffin, yes. Sweeney, yes. Weiler, yes. Ebel, no. Leishman, no. Munns, no. Rung, no. McGuire, no. So
I
get-
said yes.
Oh, you said yes. Oh, I thought.
I said I had in discussion mentioned I was thinking
Oh,
about
I'm sorry.
supporting it. So
I'm
it's
sorry about
4-4.
that.
Representative Griffin and Representative Rung will present it to the full committee on
Without
Tuesday.
recommendation.
We don't know which way it will go. No, we'll need to have both sides because there's a number of issues on this.
Sorry about that. I thought you said yes. in my head.
No. Well, those things happened. All right, so. Right. And we did hear that they don't know how many lakes are affected. They don't know how many platforms are out there and how many people who have been putting them up without a permit will decide they ought to. Because I suspect it'll be fewer than one might expect, at least the first year.
It seems to me if they wanted to raise money for that fund, the way to do it would be have a surcharge on the fee for a platform as it is.
Definitely. Or we could consider raising the fee from $50 to $100 or whatever. But in any event, we're concerned about the money. All right, so we're through with our platforms for today. House Bill 1710, procedures relative to child abduction. Later, I think I will leave that to last. I think 1710 will be quicker because nobody understands it. Representative Scheer, are you here to enlighten us on this? Well, I found your information very useful on occasion.
Thank you. As a policy matter, there was disagreement in children and family law about 1710. In two ways, there's some language problems, or in three ways. There's some language problems that the minority was concerned about. There was a broader issue of, we heard some significant concern by those who represent domestic violence victims that this would be weaponized, that it would be used against victims of domestic violence who perhaps were not, who were foreign nationals in some fashion. And the third concern was we were moving too fast. This had, I think there are around 20 states that have passed this, but of those 20, virtually all of them made significant changes to it. There are some states who rejected it, and there's the rest of the states have not taken this up. In New Hampshire, there was an effort several years ago to passed this Uniform Child Abduction Act, and it failed. It had a kind of a messy procedural history, and ended up dying, I think, in the Senate. So that's the policy overview of this. In terms of the fiscal impact, I think there's two fiscal impacts. I think the fiscal note noted that the judiciary would need to hire somebody who was experienced in, who could advise them and is experienced in the area of the Hague Convention and a variety of transnational issues that would relate to this. And that accounts for the fiscal note. It's indeterminable how, from my perspective, the load that this might add to the court system, apart from needing a specialist in the court system to educate the judges and deal with the very complicated transnational issues. My former day job, now part-time day job, is as a law professor at UNH Law, and I run our international criminal law LLM and master's program. And what I've learned from that, and I've taught in that over course of several years, what I've learned from that is the issues relating to let's call it transnational crime, but relationships between two countries in legal, whose legal systems are different, are very difficult and thorny. And I think we need to think more seriously about how much it's going to really cost in terms of lawyer time and judge time to do this, given the policy concerns that at least a minority expressed as to this bill.
Okay, thank you. Representative Sweeney? Thank you, Representative Sharon, unless we have questions.
Madam Chair, I would just say this feels like another, obligation that we'd have as a state to perform, similar to 1576 that we had on criminal restitution. So I'm supportive of just passing.
Mr. Mooney wishes to enlighten us, and I think we know little enough about this topic to ask for some help. Would you please identify yourself, sir?
Madam Chair, my name is Charles Mooney. I'm one of the two New Hampshire commissioners on uniform state laws, and was delighted when I approached the leadership of the Children and Family Law Committee that they were very interested and have pursued this, and quite happy that on the policy basis the committee reported it out. I was disappointed that there was some, as the previous speaker mentioned, concerns on the part of the minority. I think all of those could be well addressed if necessary. I rose here to speak primarily not to the merits, but which I think are overwhelmingly strong, but to the fiscal point. And of course, I haven't researched that and don't bring data to you on that, but I do have a few points to consider, ask you to consider. Of the states that have enacted this, many indicated that it would have no fiscal impact. A few said they couldn't estimate, but it would be negligible. I think there was one that's up over $50,000, but the figure that New Hampshire apparently has is quite an outlier of all the states that have considered this. We already have a law that on the books that complements the Hague Convention on child abduction, and that has been used when needed and has been successful. And this law simply fills a bit of a gap, which is that it seems that more than half of the child abductions occur before there's a final custody order. And there's the gap. Some judges may not appreciate that they have the power, perhaps inherent power, to enjoin a child abduction when there appears to be a likelihood of that. And this particular act lists a long list of criteria that judges should consider in making that decision on having a child abduction prevention order before there's a final custody order. But I, as someone who was on the law faculty at the University of Pennsylvania for 35 years before retiring, and before that a practicing lawyer, am quite shocked that, given the experience in New Hampshire and the law we have on the books on child abductions and the Hague Convention, that somehow judges would be in need of a great deal of education and guidance here. I guess I have more confidence than that, but I do have some data on what other states have submitted in connection with passing this law on the fiscal cost. And if it would be helpful, this was compiled by the Uniform Law Commission office in Chicago, and I would be happy to provide that to the committee in advance of the meeting on Tuesday, and can circulate that this afternoon.
That will be valuable, thank you. I have a question. Do you know how many cases of child abduction we run into in a year?
I don't know, but the number that would involve this gap would be, I'm told by the experts at the Uniform Law Commission that have worked on this, would be a small fraction of the number that involve the act that we have on the books already. So the marginal cost, I would think, would be.
Well, I'm just worried about it. My experience has been, if they were setting up a new case that needs to be ready to handle a situation, then it costs the same whether we're going to use it once a year or 100 times a year. My question is, how many cases are there that total or that would be before final custody? And does anyone have that kind of information? Representative Ebel?
I don't, but I'd like to point out that there is somebody here from the judicial branch that I think they can speak to their fiscal note and to their specific experience.
Okay. Thank you, and we'll appreciate that information you're sending us. Is there someone from the judicial branch?
Hello, committee. My name is Lauren Warner, and I serve as the Deputy General Counsel for the Judicial Branch. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have, and to the extent I'm unable to answer one, I can certainly go gather that information.
Well, my specific question is, how many child abduction cases a year do we encounter in New Hampshire, and how many of them are before final custody, which is apparently considered the gap that this legislation is needed to fill?
And unfortunately, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I can go reach out to our business analyst and see if we have that. Certainly the child abduction cases could be something we could pull in our system. I don't know to the extent we could tell at what point in the case. Sometimes that is not necessarily available to pull in our system, but I will, right after this, go and ask and send that information on to the committee.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Representative Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the fiscal note, and I see that hitting in fiscal year 2027, which would begin July 1st, it would be over $170,000. And that is mainly in positions that would be added. But without knowing how many cases would be impacted, that's a concern. But also, you had back in the budget cuts as well, didn't you, this year? The judicial branch? No? Okay.
They ended up getting removed.
Oh, okay, all right. I just wanted to see if any of this none of this could be absorbed in your current resources.
No, not in our current resources. And as you know, Representative, correctly, it's undeterminable how many cases this might then entail. But as you mentioned, Representative McGuire, that the judicial branch essentially has to prepare for any number of cases. So we would feel if you were handling such cases, we would require a case manager and a court operations specialist, given the highly specialized nature of these cases, as well as with any new case type, brand new to the judiciary, we would need someone to manage that essentially. So to start this up, to be prepared for any potential cases, we feel those two positions would be required. And that is where that minimum of the $173,000 comes in between their salary and benefits, as well as then we would anticipate cost to train staff and judges as this new case type, given the complicated transnational law issues that could be involved. This isn't something our judges are handling on a regular basis now, so we would want to ensure that we're training them properly.
Thank you.
Representative Munns?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for coming in. I'm not a lawyer and don't pretend to be one. Is there anything about the wording of the bill that concerns you? I've heard some talk about there's a vague definition of something called credible risk, and maybe it's not clear exactly when the provisions of the bill would come into effect, and we heard earlier about some concerns about how it might impact victims of domestic abuse. I mean, do you have concerns about the language of the bill itself?
I would say to the extent that anything can be further described, that always helps judges implement the law when overseeing these cases. So if there is potential misunderstanding or open-ended definitions that can be harder to apply, I couldn't speak as just because that's the judicial branch, but I know there are other members here from for legal assistance and like that maybe could speak to more the concerns that were brought up at the public hearing regarding the weaponization used for sexual and domestic violence victims. That's not something the judicial branch would necessarily speak to, but I understand that that was discussed at the hearing from those parties.
Okay, follow up.
Does the bill, as it's worded now, give judges the appropriate amount of direction on how to enforce this law?
I would say that the training would be required. There always can be changes to the bill, and we would leave wording necessarily up to the legislature and enact as the like. I know, and looking into this, other state, I can't speak to what states might have developed, but certainly any uniform law also comes with comments. So judges would have to look to those comments to further interpret the statute.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative?
I'm not sure you exactly answered this, but is there another avenue for the judicial branch to do this without this particular law? I mean, are they empowered further by this? Or, I mean, I would just comment that this was a divided vote coming to the floor, and there were some pretty strong feelings on both sides. So I'm not sure the answer is crystal clear.
So certainly it can all depend on the case specifics, but I would say there's motions to prevent relocation, to change custody, enforce parenting plans. There's ex parte emergency motions that can be done. And certainly if there was concerns raised in an ongoing before a final plan, that's before a judge and a judge is overseeing that evidence is brought forth that there's a concern a child may be removed, there's always that ability for the court to act.
Okay, Representative Munns?
Thank you. One last question. I mean, is it fair to not say that there is no uniform law like this in effect across the state? I mean, there is no one standard, correct? I mean, in every place it's been implemented, it's been tweaked one way or the other to address that state's particular needs. So does that make it more difficult for judges, given the fact that there's no universal standard?
Well, I think if the legislation moved forward and was enacted, this would be the uniform standard then for New Hampshire, but certainly we would need that expertise to help. Essentially, those transnational issues that aren't before judges currently, we would want to make sure we have sufficient training as a whole, as a branch, to then act on these matters.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Does anyone else have comments or questions? All right, seeing it's afternoon, thank you for the information. I'd like to take a break for some lunch and a bit of a, yes, Representative Munns?
I believe there's somebody from New Hampshire Legal Assistance to talk to this bill. Could we hear from them?
I think we want to, is there someone from New Hampshire Legal? Anyone else who needs to give us vital information we don't already have? Yes, you're waving your hand. Not till after lunch, for damn sure.
I'm Dawn McKinney. I am here in the room from New Hampshire Legal Assistance, but I am by no means an expert on this. Our attorney who spoke on this issue on the policy, in the policy committee, was not able to be here today. She's in court. I can follow up with the committee with her testimony from that hearing if it would be helpful. We do have concerns, in which we expressed at that point in the process.
Okay, so you really don't have specific information we might need.
Not for this, not especially not in terms of the financial impact of it. Just that it's.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's not your. I appreciate the question. I just.
Okay.
Thank you.
Representative Ryan?
Madam Chair, I think we've heard enough that we can vote on this bill. And we only have one more bill. I'd be happy to forego lunch, just delay it. I mean, a lot of times I eat lunch at 1 o'clock. I think we could just dispose of
We
this
also
last bill.
need to caucus,
Oh.
and I think that getting lunch and caucus would be more efficient than doing it separately.
Yeah, I respect that opinion. Representative Aaron is here because of HB 1602. She came quite some distance, and I assume she would like to get home again. And then we have somebody here from DES. So, I mean, I'd be willing to move forward with a 10-minute break or something like that, unless people feel like they're really hungry.
I'm sorry, Representative Evil, but I have physical issues and I need to take a
Okay,
break
then you're
and I have to
clarifying.
get some
I
food.
get you. Okay, I
And-
get you.
So it's 10 after 12. We'll resume at 1:15, which would give everybody time to get any comments they want to give us organized. All right, recessing until 1:15. Well, I don't make a big deal about it, but Representative Sweeney, do you have a motion?
I would move interim study on this bill.
I'd second that motion.
All right. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do think it's a worthwhile bill. I think there are certainly areas that we could probably examine where this sort of uniform act would fit into New Hampshire. But with the fiscal note and with the testimony from the judiciary that this would require more staffers, perhaps, I think studying it this year and then having it in conversations for next year's budget makes the most sense to me.
Representative Evil?
I concur with my colleague. I think there's still some questions out there. There's a sense, I think, that the judicial branch can manage some of these things. I have heard that legal aid does have some issues with it, so I think interim study is a really good approach.
Okay. I'd like to say that the fiscal note, where it's mostly to train the judges to deal with it, seems excessive for a case where we don't know how many instances we have to deal with. So let's take a look at it and figure out if they really do need it. Anyone else? Okay, you can call the roll.
All right, Madam Chair, on the interim study motion offered by Representative Sweeney, seconded by Representative Ebel on 1710. Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
Representative Weiler.
Yes.
Representative Ebel.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Representative Munns.
Yes.
Representative Rung.
Yes.
Chairman McGuire.
Yes.
8-0, interim study.
All right. Representative Sweeney will bring that to the full committee. All right, that finishes 1710 and 1602. I saw that we got a giant packet of information. Well, excuse me, a medium-large packet of information. Sorry, I didn't mean to insult you. So Representative Ebel, do you have a motion?
Yes, so I should clarify that there is a typo in this bill that desperately needs to be replaced, fixed, and so I do have a one-word amendment. So how would you like me to proceed, Madam Chair? Shall I speak to the amendment first?
Yeah, if it's that simple, we should be able to approve it quickly.
Okay. On page 4 of the bill, line 33, this actually, I don't mind pointing this out to you. This clarifies that there is absolutely no point of sale fee that's allowed under this bill to be charged by any retailer, producer, or battery stewardship organization. And God only knows why, but instead of saying point of sale, it says point of scale. And this is a really important point, and I could have just let it roll to the enrollment process if I get that far. But I since it's such an important point, that's what my amendment is. So I would love it if we could pass the amendment, and then I'd be happy to move on.
Fine, let's have a show of hands to support of the amendment. Okay.
Okay. So I'd like.
Representative Ebel, I support the clarifying the issue. But does this mean they'll just have to roll the cost of the stewardship program into the base cost of the
Yes, and I'd like, but I want to discuss, I'm going to discuss a lot of things, and that is a subject that I will cover in more depth probably than you care to know. But anyways, I'd like to make a motion of ought to pass as amended on HB 1602.
Okay, and seconded by Representative Rung. All right.
Okay.
Do you wish to speak to it? You
I
needn't
would-
explain all this information if you could
Well, no,
highlight
but I'm
it.
gonna show you I'm just gonna walk you through the information. So the first thing I just wanted to point out is if you go to the back of the bill, you'll see that the effect on the state is 0 across the board. I see that
We don't have that's not what the fiscal note says, and we don't have an updated one.
the one I am looking at, it says 31, 46, 48. Yeah, and then expenditure. So this is the way this is worked. So the ultimate effect on the state is $0. The way this is worked out, any costs, and I've worked on this closely with DES, any costs incurred, which as you can see are minimal, are fully 100% reimbursed by the Battery Stewardship Organization. So ultimately, there is no cost to the state whatsoever. The other thing that you'll see in the fiscal note is that municipalities will be saving money. They did the best that they could on the fiscal note. They said the indeterminable decrease was $150,000. I can tell you it will be far, far more than that. I've heard very recently of an incident where one battery that was brought in that was either from a bike or a wheelchair cost something like $900 to dispose of. So just to kind of start from the top, lithium batteries in particular are an extreme fire risk. And as evidence of that, I've provided you with my list of supporters, and that includes the New Hampshire Fire Marshal, the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire, and the New Hampshire Association of Fire Chiefs. You will also see in your packet that that Governor Ayotte issued a proclamation that focused on the fire safety issues related to lithium batteries last year and working with DES and the Fire Marshal to focus on it for Fire Prevention Week. So about 2 years ago, because of the fire issues, I introduced a bill with a great deal of support to ban the disposal in like trash cans and landfills and all that stuff, but actually in landfills of lithium batteries because of the fire hazards. That bill, that initiative became law July 1st of 2025. And this bill is the second piece of that, because if you have a ban, the other thing you want to do is effectively create a program to collect the batteries, and that's what this would establish. And in addition to the lithium batteries, this bill also allows for the disposal of all alkaline and other rechargeable batteries, batteries that at the moment are having to be dealt with by our municipalities. The municipalities do pay a cost for removal. There was a time when the removal was free, but because there's so many hazards and it's very complex at this point, there is a very direct charge for the removal of for the disposal of batteries, not only by our municipalities, but by our businesses. So part of what I've included also in your packet behind the proclamation by Governor Ayotte is a whole series of the support letters that we got. The committee itself got a letter from Waste Management, and I believe you got a letter in support from the Solid Waste District up north. They represent Berlin and a whole lot of the North Country towns that are dealing with this. We also have a letter from Casella. We have a letter from the company that runs Wind Waste, which is the incinerator over here in Concord. They all have dealt with fires Waste Management, if you look at their letter, they had quite a few fires, including two in Auburn, where Majority Leader Osborne resides. In Rochester, Waste Management lost an entire building that cost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace. There was also a very bad fire in Lee. So the bill would create a free program for the collection of batteries here in the state, which doesn't already exist. So the other thing I wanted to share is we had an opportunity earlier this week to meet with the governor's budget director. And we had an excellent meeting. We talked in detail about this bill, and we compared it to the paint bill. And I realize that we're not here to talk about the paint bill, but that may actually be why we're here, because of concern about the governor's comments about the paint bill. The way the paint bill was worked out, and this was at the request of the paint manufacturers, there's a line in there that says that they will be allowed to assess monies for their paint. And their calculations include a per can fee for the recycling of the paint. That is not how this bill is established, and that is not how most stewardship bills are established at this point. The way this works is the battery manufacturers, I should just I'm going to back up a little bit and say that I act and have acted for 5 years as the chair of the Solid Waste Working Group, which is the state organization with stakeholders from all over the state and all areas of folks that like the solid waste industry, municipalities, all sorts of folks. We've been doing a very close analysis for like 2 years on issues that are of grave concern to the state and to the solid waste industry. Their top priority is this battery issue. So if I bring this bill forward to you, it's not something that I cooked up in my head. This is grounded in a huge amount of research and a huge amount of data. This is something so many people want, and that's why I've given you this this list. So in conversations with all of those folks, they really want me to talk about the fire safety risks, which we talked a lot about in the committee, and that's why Representative Aaron is here, and I sincerely appreciate it, the chair. But the other thing that I want to share with you folks is how this pricing is. So in the conversation with the governor's budget director, they're very positive, but they had questions about the effect on New Hampshire consumers. So this is how the program will work. Once, so the producers came to us, the battery producers. I have the full support of the battery industry. They're interested in recycling, and they're interested in a program like this. So if we initiate this program in this state, any recycling costs that relate to New Hampshire get rolled up into the battery industry's costs. Now, the battery industry views the United States as a single business entity. So any state that initiates a recycling program, those costs get rolled up into the production costs across billions and billions and millions of batteries. And so as far as it relates to New Hampshire specifically, there's no difference in the cost that would be charged to New Hampshire consumers versus consumers in Texas or in Oklahoma once we have our program up and running. Conversely, if we don't do this program, the approximately 20 to 25% of the population of the United States by 2027 is anticipated to be participating in these programs. By 2028, when our program is slated to become effective, as if this bill passes, 50% of the population will be involved. All those recycling costs will be included in the pricing of the battery manufacturers. So if we don't participate, the recycling costs of other places can be included in the batteries, and we will have no benefit from that. Whereas if we do participate, we'll have a free recycling program. And so and this question is the question that was asked by Mr. Gary, the budget director, and while we were sitting on the floor, I'll admit it against interest, I was working really hard on this. And I reached out to the Battery Network, which oversees all the stewardship programs, to talk to them about what it might cost in the state of New Hampshire to get this program up and running. I have a parallel number. I talked to the head of the Solid Waste Bureau in Vermont. In Vermont, it was about $650,000 for the state of Vermont. They've seen no appreciable increase. Anecdotally, they've seen no increase in their battery costs. And they even checked through various zip codes on Amazon to see if there was a change in cost, depending on whether a state had a recycling program or it didn't. And there was no difference in cost. So this is the finance committee. So stick with me on this. The battery industry, single corporate entity, is valued in this country at about $20 billion. So if you take $800,000 for the recycling program in New Hampshire, you roll that up into the overall manufacturing business of the batteries, the percentage that a battery might be affected by having a free program is minuscule. It's absolutely minuscule. So what are the advantages of having a recycling program? The advantages are, one, over time, the more we recycle our goods, the cost of the minerals that are used for the batteries will come down, and we will not be at the mercy of China. Because at this point, China controls 80% of the processing capacity, and we're getting a lot of newly mined minerals from China and from other countries. And even the president recently has signed executive orders calling for more recycling in this country so that we won't be at the mercy of China, which is starting to throttle back on the minerals that they're giving us for our industry. The last thing is that China is importing approximately $30 billion in goods between alkaline-related matters and lithium into this country. And people, national security people are calling upon us to recycle all these goods that are coming over from China and to build our own strategic stockpile, because we need it for our for our economy and to be able to effectively compete in the global market. So I'll stop there. I've given you a sheet that covers just about everything. This also completely supports our state solid waste management plan. We're trying to reduce landfilling any way that we can. We're trying to keep toxic waste out of our waste stream. We're trying to protect our staff and our first responders. And it's hard for me to come up with a reason not to do this for the people of our state. And I hope you agree.
Okay, Representative Rung, did you have anything to add?
No, I think Representative Evil covered all the bases.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, in that case, we've already done a show of hands on the amendment.
Yeah, that's
Okay, in that case, the motion is ought to pass with amendment by Representative Ebel, and the clerk can call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the amended 1602, which was amended by 2026-1166H, Representative Griffin.
No.
Representative Sweeney.
No.
Representative Weiler. Representative Ebel.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Representative Munns.
Yes.
Representative Rung.
Yes.
Chair McGuire.
No.
5 in favor, 3 opposed.
Yes, motion passes. Representative Ebel, you'll present it to the committee.
I'd be happy to.
All right. So that finishes the things we were supposed to do. We have a recommendation of ought to pass on 1458. We have a recommendation of interim study on House Bill 1469. Ought to pass on 1576. A split decision on House Bill 1477. Ought to pass on House Bill 1602, an interim study on 1710. Okay, everyone agrees? All right, in that case, thank you all, and I'll see you Tuesday. Oh, all I need was some food. It matters. All right, and I will go talk to Janet.